So kind of for our next question here, we're going to be dealing with the aspect or the concept of net worth. Net worth is kind of tossed around a lot. You might see it in or hear it in movies that are talking about economies or talking about people of power. A lot of really high paid actors and actresses, they have a net worth, they're worth something. The Queen of England has her net worth. People have net worth. It's kind of weird to think about that, but usually we think about net worth in terms of what you own and what you still owe on, if that kind of makes sense. And that's kind of split up into a couple of different categories. It is your assets, which is things that are worth money. And assets, I know that you think your iPhone 6 or your iPhone whatever is an asset. It's really not. It's worth nothing. Computers, worth nothing. Clothes, worth nothing. All those things that cost you money, that might be a lot of money, are worth absolutely no assets. They're not really worth anything. Things like cars, that's an asset. Things like a house, that's an asset. Liquid money, like cash, that's an asset as well. So you can certainly turn some of the items that you might own that you think are assets into actual assets, but the items themselves aren't, unless they're very, very special. Maybe think about collectibles or something like that. Then perhaps they could be an asset. But generally speaking, nothing you own is going to be an asset unless it is a very, very high valued object, perhaps like a car, or perhaps like a collectible thing, or just cash. So let's kind of, with that, let's kind of look at a question and let's discover this net worth type thing. So Sam and Caitlin own a $25,000 car with an outstanding car loan of $15,000. They own a home that's valued at $225,000, and they have a mortgage on that home of $210,000. They also have some student loans that are totaling $5,000. What is their net worth? So let's categorize everything that we see here. Let's categorize it into assets, which is stuff they own. And then the flip side of assets is liabilities. And liabilities is, well, basically it is the exact opposite of an asset. It is stuff that you owe money on. So a liability, you'll hear people say oh, it's just such a liability. It just basically means that it's kind of like an insult or kind of a jab at somebody, but a liability just means oh, something bad could happen and then you're going to pay the price for it. And in this case, a liability is quite literally you owe money on something. So it's kind of like a liability to you. You must owe this money to someone else. It's not yours. Think of it as kind of borrowing something. Let's do the assets first. So the assets are just going to be what do they own that's worth money? Well, they own a $25,000 car. That is an asset. So that's money that they have. It's tied up in a car, but it's still an asset. It's money that they could get from that. They also own a home. Home, pretty large asset. Probably the biggest asset that you'll ever get in your life is a home. And their home is worth $225,000. Again, think of it they could sell that and get this much money from it. So that is an asset. And it really just seems like those are the only two things that Sam and Caitlin have that are considered assets. Car and a home. Now, what we're going to do here is the liabilities. So we're going to go back to the car, and even though that car is worth $25,000, they still owe a car loan of $15,000. So that is a liability. That's something that they still owe on it. Their mortgage, right? Even though their house is worth $225,000, they still owe $210,000 on it. That's the mortgage. And then, of course, they have a student loan totaling $5,000. They owe that to whoever they borrowed it from, so they owe that as well. Let's go ahead and let's calculate what the total assets are going to be. And that's going to be $250,000. $250,000. I should probably add a 0 onto the car loan here. The liabilities in this case are going to be our and I should add a 0 onto this as well. There we go. So that's going to be $230,000 here. So their assets were $250,000. Their liabilities $230,000. Their net worth is the difference between these. Is your assets divided by the liabilities. So in this, or subtract the liabilities. So in this case, if their assets were worth $250,000 and their liabilities, the stuff that they still owe money on, is $230,000, well, then they're actually in the green. They actually own more than they owe by $20,000. So their net worth is $20,000 on this one. We're going to do a very brief sort of extension question to this using the debt to equity ratio. We're gonna take a look at a quick example on this one. So I'm gonna just kind of break up this video just a little bit. We're gonna use Sam and Caitlin. We're gonna use what we've had here because a lot of the times net worth questions lead onto a debt to equity ratio. So I'm just gonna kind of pause the video here, or I'm gonna stop it here, and part 2 will be on a debt to equity ratio type question.